Hi everybody, welcome to another video. My name is Ines. Today I wanted to talk about some things I've been talking about with people in public, about the sense of self, the expansion of the sense of self, depth of the sense of self, what that looks like neurologically, what that looks like in our brain, what that looks like psychologically, what that looks like theologically. I think there are certain individuals, certain of those of us who experience life in a more sensitive way, who experience reality in a more visceral, maybe existential way, who question things, who are more privy to the realities of the self, and the self is, and the notion of change internally, change as it relates to the world, and the concept of the expansion of the self, of who we are, becoming who you are, the Nietzschean idea, the modern psychoanalysis about neuroses and these various things. It's complicated, it's complex, and there's a lot of people talking about a lot of different things. And so in this video, I wanted to share my theory about what's really going on with the self and what that looks like neurologically. And I'll try to connect it intermittently with my understandings of history, theology, and philosophy. So there are two basic regions in our brain that are associated with the sense of self: the medial prefrontal cortex and the posterior cingulate cortex. These two regions are within our default mode network. And the default mode network is a network of brain regions that are chiefly responsible for self-oriented tasks, task-negative tasks, right? The thinking that we do, the brain activity when we're not doing any particular task, the rumination or the self-oriented thought. Right? And the MPFC and PCC chiefly have the responsibilities and the functions of maintaining a coherent sense of self, relating our experiences to our sense of self, and building a narrative of self across time. When you're manic, actually maybe that I would go there first, but the MPFC and PCC are typically very tightly coupled, right? What that means is that typically there's a lot of blood running through those two regions, and for a basic reason, because we need those regions in order to mediate with the world. I have a self, and the self is existing with the world. Here's myself talking to this camera. Now, this sense of self, however, as we know from our personal experiences in life, can change, it can update, right? It is comprised of, you could say, a set of psychological priors. It's a model. And new information is always coming in, and new information can lead to change of small things, but ultimately also change of very large things. So when someone gets depressed, among other things, one of the things that happens is that those two regions, your medial prefrontal cortex and your posterior cingulate cortex, they couple tightly. What that means is a lot of blood is running through those two regions, and so your sense of self is very rigid. You're stuck in your mind, you're stuck in these ruminating thoughts, you're stuck in this loop. And it's this self-consuming loop, but not in like a renewal kind of sense, not like the Ouroboros or the Eucharist, where in which the self-consumption results in some renewal. Rather, it's a self-consumption that results in decay and more disintegration, fragmentation. But there is, maybe some of you are familiar with this notion of the dark night of the soul, where in which a person passes from that depressive phase into this light, this emergence into self-understanding, illumination. Obviously, it's like the night becomes day. The depression turns to affirmation, vitality. When you take psychedelics, those two regions, your MPFC and PCC, they fully decouple. So it's like you're experiencing reality without a sense of self. Now, also curiously, and also psychedelics are very useful for people struggling with depression and anxiety and other such quote-unquote mental illnesses. Now, what's very interesting is that certain individuals, like myself, have these psychedelic experiences without the use of psychedelics. In other words, people that have some form of bipolar or cyclothymia, which is oscillating between mania, hypomania, and depression. What is mania? Well, mania is very similar to the psychedelic experience. It's different, obviously, but it's those two regions, the MPFC and PCC, decoupling. So the sense of self expands beyond its former limits. Of course, this expansion can sometimes be too much, and you can have this manic flight, and you can crash, and you don't know how to integrate it. But also you can see that oscillation, the period in which your self is very open, if you know from experience, right? You feel great, you're manic, you're high, but then you crash, not necessarily because you're any different than before, but because now that you've returned to that normal state of self, it feels so much more constrictive than the open state you were in. And sometimes, the insights and ideas and the expansive state that you felt you were in while you were up high, you feel you've lost that. And so it actually, exacerbates the depressive phase. Now, there are more videos to be made about this, but the curious thing is that if we can see that this mechanism of the expansion of the self has a neurological signature, and we can sort of also connect bipolar people with creative people, with writers, artists, prophets, mystics, and we can connect these things in this integrative, coherent framework of understanding psychosis or the dissolution of self, the expansion of self, then we can pinpoint creative individuals as the source of humanity's progression. Because what is this MPFC-PCC decoupling? It's the opening of what was closed in your mind. It's the updating of the self-model. And what do we see historically with humanity? This updating of the self-model, this updating of the collective self-model. And it's always these individuals that come and do this. Now, obviously, everyone takes a role, everyone takes a part in their little movements and little things here. But you can look at great individuals who, prophets and thinkers and geniuses and scientists that produce these revolutionary theories that are so in contrast to what exists, but that move humanity forward in some meaningful sense. Right? So this idea of the expansion of the self as a neurological reality in our brain, and simultaneously as maybe an explanatory, a way of explaining the distinctions in the way that individuals experience life, the mechanism, the evolutionary mechanism of development. And in this sense, really, I think what we have is that creative individuals are the ones that are bringing forth the new, right? The what is not yet informed, because there is the expansion, and the expansion is into something that does not yet exist. In large part, it's a future that has not been put into form, and it is the task of the individual to put that into form, to make that into a reality, to expand their sense of self, and doing so assist the collective unfolding as well. Well, there's a lot more ideas I wanted to share on this, but I just wanted to make this video just to share some short insights about this sense of self, expansion of the self, sense of self, and mania, psychedelics, depression, mental illness, neurosis, and as a final thing, most quote-unquote normal people, or people who are less sensitive, do not have the intensity. So this is a spectrum in which what really matters is not your capacity, it's more amplitude. So the higher you go, the lower you go, but there is a necessity of integrating those things. And so if you live life at a real flat kilter, then you may not experience lows, but you're not going to experience highs either. But obviously those experience of highs and lows can be debilitating to some degree. But ultimately their integration produces very valuable things both for yourself, but also for, one could say, humanity.